What's up everyone on the internet? Thank you for making this video part of it. I am so excited to upload this one for you guys because this video we're going back to the Star Wars universe to take a look at the latest installment in the franchise, Ahsoka. So it's been a while since I did a Star Wars review because I think the last one I actually did was Book of Boba Fett. I would have done one for Obi-Wan, but by the time that series was wrapping up, I caught COVID, and by the time I recovered, I just didn't have it in me to do that video, so yeah, but I knew for a fact that once this show was coming out, I had to do a review on this because this show right here has been on my radar since 2020 because I think it was D23 when they released like the schedule of like what kind of shows they're going to be releasing for the following years. This, among two others, was on my most anticipated list. Ahsoka, Star Wars Visions, and The Acolyte. Now, while I enjoyed Star Wars Visions because seeing different anime directors tell their own stories within the Star Wars universe was so exciting, I'm also really curious to see how they're going to handle The Acolyte because that is going to be the first show set in the High Republic, which I am very excited for. But this show right here, this show I have been so excited for because it focuses on one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, Ahsoka Tano. Honestly, if I had to create a Mount Rushmore of my favorite Star Wars characters, it would probably be Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka Tano, and Darth Maul. Watch me get eaten in the comment section down below because heaven forbid I tell the Star Wars community that I like something that may upset their way of life, because if you follow me on social media, all I did was post an Instagram reel saying that I really liked Ahsoka, and suddenly it just started a civil war in the comments where some people were against this show and while others were defending it. But anyway, this show debuted back in late August this year and takes place during the same timeline as The Mandalorian, where Ahsoka Tano is actually hunting down the last of the Empire. Because if you remember in Mando Season 2, she's not just hunting Imperial officers, she's hunting the Imperial officer, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And this serves as a double-edged lightsaber. See what I did there? Because while hardcore fans like me are so hyped to see Thrawn because the last time we saw him was the end of the series finale of Star Wars Rebels, to the average audience, everyone's like, who? Now this is where Star Wars takes a small minor misstep, because if you wanted to get in on the fandom and wanted to see what everyone was all talking about, you could jump into this franchise at any point and still understand what is going on in the story. But this show right here made me realize that if you haven't watched Rebels or if you haven't seen some amount of Clone Wars, you may be a little bit lost. In a time where the franchise is either focusing on the Mandalorians or the Rebellion, it feels like it's been a long time since we focused on the Jedi. Yes, I'm aware that we did have Obi-Wan, but that was set during a time where the Jedi were practically extinct and those who were left behind were being hunted down by the Empire. But in this show, with the Empire gone, it almost feels like a rebirth of the Jedi way, which means it's time to bring back lightsabers. And that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with Star Wars in the first place, because even though I enjoyed seeing these crazy space battles and seeing armies shoot each other with blasters, the best part of Star Wars, in my opinion, were the Jedi. And growing up during the prequels, oh my god, my mind was blown seeing these Jedi doing crazy flips in the air and doing these insane tricks with their lightsabers. Oh my god, chef's kiss, because that was the coolest thing a kid could ever see. So to see that this show was going to be focusing on a master and apprentice taking on the galaxy, that was enough to get me hooked onto this show. And while it is called Ahsoka, a lot of it also revolves around several characters from Star Wars Rebels, more specifically a Mandalorian character called Sabine Wren, who's actually Ahsoka's apprentice. At the same time, we're introduced to new characters like Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, who, by the way, does not blink. I'm not kidding. I watched several episodes and she rarely blinks. It's kind of scary, to be honest. It's almost like she's looking right into your soul. But anyway, while they're not technically Sith, they're still bad Jedi. And while Ahsoka and Sabine are trying to bring back a lost friend, those two are trying to bring back Thrawn, because if he comes back, there's going to be another war. And I love how in the first half of this season, the story goes back and forth between these two groups as we see the stark differences on how these masters treat their apprentices. Because when you look at Ahsoka and Sabine, their relationship is kind of rocky, as opposed to Baylan and Shin, who are actually on good terms. But once we get in the second half of the season, that's where the show pulls out all the stops, because oh my god, the stakes get high and our characters go on a journey. And without giving any spoilers, I will say episode 5 of Ahsoka, in my opinion, is without a doubt the best live action TV episode in the Star Wars franchise. I mean, oh my God, to quote Homelander,
it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Chef's kiss there, baby. Again, watch me get eaten alive by the Star Wars community for saying something that may upset their way of life, but if you watch Clone Wars or Rebels, that episode right there is a real treat. But anyway, while the story is pretty much straightforward, as we're practically going from point A to point B with several references to the cartoon sprinkled throughout the entire season, one of the other things that I also loved about this show were the lightsaber fights. As I mentioned earlier, growing up during the prequel era, I was just spoiled with some of the best lightsaber fights in this franchise. With that being said, going into this show, one of the things that was highlighted was that there are going to be several lightsaber fights in this season. Now, while I enjoyed watching Ahsoka whip out her iconic white lightsabers, seeing Baylan Skoll take out his orange lightsaber, oh my God, that took the fights to a whole nother level. Now, I am no sword expert, but I really wish we had something like this in the recent movies, because watching Ahsoka and Baylan go at each other was pretty crazy. I mean, seeing Ahsoka enter her Samurai Ronin stance, you get a sense that she's going to be very quick with her moves and try to end the fight as fast as she can, as opposed to Baylan Skoll's stance, which is almost kind of like a knight, honestly. And seeing his strikes, not only are they powerful, but this dude's also really agile. Another thing that also made Baylan an interesting character is, despite all the terrible acts he's committing, he really thinks that this is for the greater good of the galaxy, and that just made him a far more interesting villain. But yeah, the lightsaber fights in this show are pretty good. Now, are they as good as what we saw in the prequel movies? No, but as far as television goes, the lightsaber fights in Ahsoka are pretty good, and I think probably some of the best that we've seen in any live-action Star Wars TV show. So overall, I really loved this show. As someone who fell in love with Ahsoka when she made her debut in Clone Wars, in a time where she was not very well received by the fans, I held on, knowing that she had potential, and this show was everything that I had hoped for. So if you're someone who has either watched Clone Wars or Rebels, this is a show that you probably should watch, because not only does it have Clone Wars nostalgia, but it also feels like another chapter to Star Wars Rebels. With that being said, I am speaking as someone who has watched both cartoons, and if you haven't seen Clone Wars or Rebels, chances are you may get a little lost in this show. But anyway, this show pretty much takes us back to the good old days where Star Wars took you on a journey that had a sense of wonder and really made you want to go on an adventure. So if you're looking for something to binge on Disney Plus, I highly recommend you watch Ahsoka, and with 8 solid episodes, this show is really fun to binge through. Well, that's going to do for this video, guys. That was my overall view on Ahsoka. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button to get updates from this channel. I'll see you next time with a brand new video. Bye-bye.